Let's pause and understand add event listeners a little bit. When you interact with the web page, click a button, type in a field, hover over an element, or even move your mouse, all of these actions trigger events. And events are just notifications that the browser sends out. Hey, somebody did this event or did this action. They clicked the button, typed in a field, so on and so forth. Now, if you want your code to react to those events, you need to add an event listener, basically telling the browser, hey, when this event happens, I want you to call this function or I want you to execute this function. Let's come back to this shopping list here and let's bring those fields to life. So if I come over here and I type in cheese and hit the add item button, obviously nothing happens because we're not capturing the value, we're not wiring the event, we're not adding an event listener. So to implement that, let's think a little bit about the algorithm or the thought process that we need to follow here. Obviously, we need to capture the value that the user types into those inputs. And then we need to also capture this button so that we can add an event listener to it. And then obviously we're also going to need to capture this list so that we're able to inject whatever we create into that list. So let's go ahead and switch back to the JavaScript file and figure out how we can go about doing that. I'm going to actually put this split between the HTML and the JavaScript just so we can see them both at the same time. Here I'm going to create a groceries input variable that will be document.get element by ID. Our ID here is groceries input, so I'll just go ahead and copy it from there. And here we go. Then let's create a constant for groceries add button. Let's do the query selector here. Let's try to get fancy a little bit here. So the selector we're looking for here, let me do backticks just so I can put it on a separate line. Let's search for all the lists that are of value groceries. And we actually need to put the square bracket here. And find me the button within that actually has the data action equal add. Let's see if this actually works first. I'll copy it. I'll go back to my browser, paste that in there. Okay, so obviously that was able to capture exactly the button that we're looking for. So here we go. I now have a reference to my groceries input and I have a reference to my add button. Let's also get a reference to the list itself. So let's go ahead and do constant groceries list. That will be, actually we can copy that, put it over here. What we're looking for is the list item that lives under the groceries data list here. All right, let's see, is this selecting the right thing? We'll paste it in here. Hit enter. Okay, it looks like it did not find what we're looking for. Let's find out why. Oh, we're looking for unnumbered list. Let's try it again. Here we go. So this is our unnumbered list. Now, if we start noticing that we have kind of a little bit of duplications here where I had to call out this groceries list twice, maybe one thing I could do is to create a groceries section and we'll do a scoped search instead. So groceries section, that will be document.query selector without the unnumbered list. Let's remove that. And then over here, we can search for the data action of ID within the groceries section. Query selector. Here we go. And same thing, we could do it for the groceries list itself. That will be the grocery section query selector UL. So we're looking for the UL that lives under the grocery section. So this is just me trying to reduce the amount of duplication that we have in our code a little bit. Let's see, over here, when I saved the file, I got an error that says failed to execute query selector on element data action ID. It's not a valid selector. Let's find out why. Looks like I forgot to add my opening square bracket. If I save, okay, this is not complaining anymore. All right, so now what we're trying to do is capture whatever is typed into this list here or into this input here. So if I type in cheese, let me go ahead and copy this real quick into the terminal. If I do .value and hit enter, we see that we're actually able to capture the value inside of that input. So now I want to create the function. Now we don't care about the HTML code anymore, or let me use the whole space for the JavaScript file. If I wanted to create a function to add grocery item. So what that will need to do is, one, we need to capture the user input. We need to create a new DOM element of type list item. We're gonna need to add the list item to the groceries list. And then obviously all of that will have to happen as a response to us clicking the groceries add button. So we'll do a groceries add button that add event listener. So on click, we want you to call add groceries item. So let's see how we can do that. All right, first, here's the value, or the user input is gonna be the groceries input dot value. Next, we'll create the new DOM element. So const new list item equal document, dot create element. This element is going to be of type list item. Then we'll use the new list item to modify the content of it. So text content will be whatever the user input is. And then finally, we need to add that new list item into our groceries list. So groceries list dot append child. So we're basically adding a child to this list, and that child is our new list item. Now let's see what that does. So if I come back to my list over here, I'll type in cheese, hit the add item. Here we go. We're able to add items into our list. Let's reiterate what we've done. We've added an event listener that listens for the click event. And when that happens, we're calling this function. What does this function do? It captures the user input. So that comes from the document.getElementById of groceries input. That is our input. We get the value of that field. Then we use the DOM API to create a new element of type list item, because that's what we need to append into our list. We've modified the text content of that new list item. Then we've appended it as a child into our groceries list. This is the beating heart of interactive JavaScript. We're able to create events that trigger functions, and those functions are able to modify the DOM. Now, while this might be a great way to demonstrate how we can use the event listeners to make modifications to the web page, this may not be the best way to create accessible forms, but we'll talk about that in the next video.